Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Passive House Podcast, recorded in Tarrytown, New York at the PhiusCon 2021 Passive House Conference. Before we get started, I want to thank Phius for putting on the conference and for coordinating with us on these interviews, as well as NYSERDA for serving as conference partner with Phius and community partner with us here at the Passive House Accelerator. Thank you, too, to Rockwell North America. Their generous support underwrote all of these interviews as well as our coverage of the conference. With that, please enjoy my interview with Elizabeth Turner of Precipitate. We have Elizabeth Turner from Precipitate here joining us for this special interview at the PhiusCon conference. Elizabeth, thanks for sitting down with me to have a chat.
Definitely good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So could you start by introducing Precipitate's work and your role there?
Yeah, so we've really kind of come to realize that our work is working towards climate justice. And we see Passive House as one of the ways to do that, one of our tools and methodologies to achieve that. And I think it's kind of through two main directions. One is we do a lot of Passive House for affordable housing. Yeah. And we know that people who are lower income are most impacted by the changing climate. And so we're really excited to be offering like really resilient, low energy homes that have a lower energy burden for people who it impacts most. And then the other side of that is who we're engaging in the design conversations. So we're an all-woman firm. We have an awesome staff that we see as a responsibility to mentor and train in building science. And we not only kind of keep that knowledge internal to ourselves, but we do a lot of sustainable design consulting for other architecture firms. And so we see architecture, consulting, and education kind of being a really core thing of what we do, with education being kind of critical to make the next steps for climate justice, not for just like a few people that have bought into it, but really expanding to a large population in our community.
So it sounds like lots of community engagement work then. Can you dive deeper into that? I think this is so important, and I think a lot of firms are probably could really benefit from that, experience and successful case studies and approaches.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think when we're in the role of a consultant, we don't often have a lot of say of how community engagement happens. Yeah. But we've been fortunate to be part of a couple of really successful project teams that were affordable housing that did a lot of community engagement work. One of those is Bayview Townhome Redevelopment in Madison, Wisconsin. And the architecture team there, there's existing townhomes that are being replaced by more dense housing as well as community center. And two of those buildings will be Passive House certified. And so we're lucky to join the team as a Passive House consultant. But they really sat down and asked residents, what do they want to see in their future new homes? And a lot of those things were difficult to mesh with Passive House technology, Passive House strategies and methodology. But we figured out, what were those core things that were important to people. And one of the things was having townhomes that were not just like a box, but had kind of bump outs for window wells, window seats, a lot of facade articulation, which from a design perspective was beautiful. From a Passive House detailing perspective, we're like, please don't do this. But we kept some things that were really critical. We decided to add shading to the south windows instead of removing some of the facade articulation, because we knew how important that was for the residents. And if they hadn't had those conversations with the current and future residents, we wouldn't have had that values-based discussion, even though it is affordable housing. There's another project that we're working on in Northfield, Minnesota, with the Community Action Center of Northfield, and they provide supportive and transition housing for people like really close to like currently experiencing homelessness and trying to transition to their next step. And that organization, again, the residents really preferred townhomes. And not only just kind of a row house of like in Bayview it's 7 kind of connected, they're doing duplexes so that it really feels like a single family residential community, which is important to make that transition for the people who are going to live there. And we figured out how to make it work. We have probably more insulation than we would have in a different situation, but we also have more shading and porches and things that make it feel comfortable and cozy and really home-like, because that was really important to those.
Right,
those
really
folks.
responding to those needs and desires. Yeah.
And I think too, like when in our work as architects, it starts before we even get the project, when we're just interviewing and kind of doing meet and greets with people who might be potential future clients. So one of the things I like to talk about with them is how important it is to have conversations with future residents. I think that's something that doesn't typically happen in affordable housing, especially. It's kind of really developer driven and like how fast can you get it done? And I think there's a really important tie between the process we use to get passive house certified projects and ones that are really socially responsible too and engage people. It's this view that architecture should be about creating, like it's a huge investment regardless. So like you want to make the best of your investment. And so you want to talk to people and make sure that when you are having a huge investment of resources, often public resources, that it is meeting the direct needs of people who are going to live there. I guess that seems pretty straightforward, but it just doesn't. Like we get into this mode where like we just got to cut our fee, like that's all that matters. And I think we lose the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve with affordable housing, which is creating homes that meet social needs as well as energy needs, and kind of tackle reducing energy burden and being more resilient for people who are more vulnerable. So those things, I think, like in the past year or so, I think it's been really clear how tied the environmental justice piece is to the social justice piece. And we just have to do those two things at the same time.
So part of, what's the secret in term to actually reach potential residents? I'm reading into what you just said a little bit, thinking that maybe part of it is really in the proposal process when you're competing for a job, right? Is to write that into the scope. Is that?
I think that's an important part of it, and I think it also starts before that with relationship building and building relationships. I think organizations that you come to work with who are the client have relationships with their the people that they serve, their clients. So that's really important, and finding those organizations you want to partner with that do value those relationships, I think is important. And then we also have conversations with people we know might not do a project for 3 to 5 years, right? And just get to know them and what their values are, and talk more about values than we do about the fee or the process or anything, because I think the things that you tie to values are the things that don't get value engineered out of the project and kind of are a core piece of why you're doing the work together. And then you can set appropriate budgets from the very beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. So you are doing a couple of presentations at the conference. Is that right? Related to multifamily?
Just one. Just one this year,
Okay. So what is the presentation about multifamily work going to be about? What are you going to be addressing?
So we've done some projects where, the design team really knows from the beginning they're going to do passive house and kind of everything's dialed in and it's very sophisticated. There's a form that was designed for passive house. In the presentation that we're going to give tomorrow, the design team had a design. The city of St. Paul said, this is great. We want you to do a passive house pilot case study for us with this design that was not designed for passive house at all. Nobody on the team had any experience with it or honestly, much of an interest in it at that point, right? But the funding was going to be tied to being passive house certified.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a really interesting case study of how you can do it.
Yeah.
And also how it's way more expensive and not ideal.
Right.
So kind of those two things together.
Yeah.
I think the design, I think it was a really exciting project for us because we saw the transformation of the design and construction team from being kind of skeptical about like, why are we having to do this? Nobody wants, especially when your fee is already set and your design's already set, like try to have to meet an additional regulatory hurdle. But Nick, one of the project architects, his kind of takeaway was like, once you learn this stuff, you can't unlearn it. And he is currently becoming a CPHC. Awesome. And revised all of the standard details for their firm, and kind of just moving forward, they incorporated a lot of what they learned from Passive House methodology. So it's a pretty fun.
That's a great
process.
Story. Yeah, that's a great story. So what do you? So some of the details are being formed by Passive House. Probably other design approaches are being informed by Passive House. So what do you see as the kind of future direction of Precipitate in relation to Passive House after that experience?
I mean, I think that all of our projects, I think all of our projects are Passive House projects at this point.
Great.
We're doing a few projects that are just net zero. I mean, just net zero. It's fantastic. So we have a couple of libraries that are looking to be net zero projects. So they're not going to be Passive House certified, but we will use Wi-Fi passive modeling and all of the kind of best practices from Passive House and air sealing strategies to achieve net zero. And I think right now and for the next few years, we'll probably be doing a lot of that education and consulting work, because there's a big demand in the Minneapolis market to kind of build up capacity of people who are trained, certified Passive House consultants, have a few projects under their belt. We're happy to be kind of supporting a lot of diverse firms in that work. And I think in the future, we see ourselves kind of staying on the forefront of what's next and doing more architecture ourselves in-house as well. And also looking at embodied carbon. We had a client challenge us. We were already set, ready to go with a Passive House certified accessory dwelling unit in Minneapolis. Then we started talking about potential wall types, and the client was pretty horrified by the options with a lot of foam and embodied energy, even in the case of non-foam insulation products. So we are doing that one as a straw bale house that is also incorporates Passive House principles. So I think embodied carbon is like the big next thing. And kind of balancing those things and doing embodied carbon models in addition to energy models for projects and balancing them.
Well, it sounds like that straw bale ADU will be a good presentation at a future PhiusCon.
We'll be presenting. I think it's Passive House Alliance, so one of the webinars in December.
Oh, great.
On that project,
Nice.
So it's currently under construction. Last week they started installing the bales. So
Awesome.
Get some good construction photos there.
Yeah. So how long have you been involved with Passive House? Were you introduced to Passive House through that pilot, or do you have what's your journey to Passive House?
So I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a Master's of Architecture and a dual degree in Sustainable Design.
Cool.
And so I've been interested in energy efficiency and energy modeling, early phase energy modeling for a really long time, about a decade. And just didn't have a lot of success actually implementing that in the firms I was working at. We kind of do a trial, but then it wouldn't really go anywhere. We did some studies. It was just kind of stop and start. We got a client who was really interested in doing Passive House. So I became a certified Passive House consultant about 5 years ago now, I think.
Got it. Okay.
And what I really love about it's the same thing. It's the same thing I learned, the principles that I learned in grad school. But there's something about having a really rigorous certification process and methodology that clients can really understand. I think a little bit easier than just general energy efficiency. And I've seen a lot of people really respond well to kind of the Passive House approach. I also learned more in my certified Passive House consultant training than I did in my Master's of Sustainable Science. I really love the kind of deep dive into building science and focus on energy and like really kind of hands-on practical approaches. It's been really fun.
Have you provided Phius with a customer testimonial for the training?
Yeah.
That sounds like I can see the full quote right now.
Yeah, both were really excellent programs, and just like there's so many little nuggets in the Phius training that kind of, I think, takes it from conceptual to like how are you going to then actually implement this on your projects?
Right.
And I think it's like that missing link between people's aspirations and then being able to actually achieve it.
Yeah. I think there's something really powerful too about having tangible targets. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it sort of like it focuses everybody in the conversations, and that's really important. So what do you want to gain from the conference in addition to sharing the lessons learned from your cool project? What other hopes do you have during this time here?
So when COVID happened, like I could handle a lot of things, but the thing that made me the most sad and actually cry was missing coming to the Phius conference, and that got canceled.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is it's like, it is about the technical things, and I love learning about that and just being a total energy nerd and being surrounded by other energy nerds. But more than that, I feel like it's being surrounded by this wonderful community of people who are really dedicating their lives to climate justice, right? And figuring out how to make it work, and like often at great personal risk, and have dealt with a lot of challenges. Like there's just something really empowering and exciting about being in this community of people. And I've been coming for, I think, about 5 years now, and just seeing familiar faces from across the country who are doing this work, and checking in and seeing how they have grown over that amount of time too is just really exciting. Like the first conference, it was like, how are we going to achieve this? There's so many challenges and so many hurdles, like really brainstorming and getting together and collaborating over dinner, right, and sharing stories. And now we're at the point where I see people who have been my verifiers on more than one project, and we're actually making it happen. So kind of, it's like a good checkpoint to see how we actually are making progress in passive building.
Well, that is a great way to wrap up this conversation. Really wonderful chat, Elizabeth. It's great to meet you and get a chance to sit down with you.
Great. Thanks so much. Likewise.